going to, love. It didn't matter. Like I said, I love my son. I miss my son. I went through 2 years of hell for fighting with him only to lose the custody, hearing and everything, you know what? And as I said, I had 1,000,001 reasons to lie, but I wasn't going to. That wasn't the way to go about it.
Yeah, what, destroy somebody else's life to get your own life
That's
on track?
exactly right. That's exactly right. No. I tried to tell them that she was lying and not to use her, and they didn't listen. I had spoken to him, and in conversation, I told him that she was lying.
And they didn't listen?
They did not listen.
And they ran the story?
Yep, they went with the story anyway.
And how did you feel about that?
I was so angry, you know, and then I could have set the record straight, and I would have said it on camera, she's a liar. And then maybe Schapelle wouldn't be in jail.
To this day, the same disproved fabrications and smears appear regularly.
And more.
A common method to influence opinion is through repetitive use of damaging terminology. The ABC and the media in general consistently use the term convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby, with its dark connotations and endorsement of the shocking trial.
Convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby. The convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby.
Convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby has...
Convicted Bali drug smuggler Schapelle Corby.
Convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby.
This is illustrated by searching Australian news sites on a variety of terms.
The convicted drug smuggler Schapelle Corby.
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 At the same time, the ABC has repeatedly censored news which might prove to be helpful to Schapelle Corby and which might engender public sympathy or support. A typical example of this was the news suppression of the global protest for her. This was the first ever global protest in support of an Australian in the entire history of the nation. It was the first cyber-driven protest in history to end at the United Nations HQ. It was even accompanied by a groundbreaking video and presented to the UN by a pop singer. Yet, despite the massive volume of trivia and smear broadcast about Schapelle Corby over the years, it wasn't referenced by the ABC at all. Not even once. It was completely hidden from the public.
Over a period of years, the government has funded trips to Jakarta for dozens of journalists. These have been referred to as indoctrination trips. Many have returned to produce extremely hostile stories on Schapelle Corby through the ABC, Fairfax Media and others.
And more.
By October 2010, Schapelle Corby was seriously ill.
She is now helpless, hopeless, she feels useless, she feels alienated, she feels removed from the rest of humanity. She is in a situation where she could easily move forward to kill herself.
She should be moved to a special hospital like the mental hospital.
Why?
Because she's mentally sick.
A last-ditch humanitarian clemency appeal to the President of Indonesia was an effort to save her life. But the ABC produced damaging propaganda on behalf of the prison, who derived substantial access revenue from the presence of Schapelle Corby. Incredibly, the ABC sought to downplay her grave medical condition, which was central to her appeal.
However, the report also accuses Schapelle Corby of faking it.
If she's crazy, in my opinion, she won't be able to do the activities here. But she is able to do her makeup and she is able to exercise. She should stop creating nonsense sensations because it will only hurt her case.
But the governor's criticism will be hard to ignore. Matt Brown, ABC News.
This was a cynical trick. The prison story wasn't a story at all. It was old, having been run and discredited months earlier by other channels. But the ABC ran it as credible and as fresh news during a critical stage of the appeal. It was syndicated in Indonesia at the worst possible time. Then the cover-up. As soon as it had been syndicated, they edited the original web page to dilute and hide the original content. But they were caught out by Google. With Schapelle Corby's life in the balance, the ABC had acted directly to tilt the scales against her.
And the Australian media complaints procedure? This is limited to individual broadcast, which effectively prevents scrutiny of wider and serious issues. And of course, the Complaints Authority itself, a government agency. The ABC is an organ of state, and as such, has demonstrably supported government policy in undermining Schapelle Corby through a clear campaign of opinion management. It has orchestrated commercial channels, using subliminal messaging in entertainment broadcasts, engaged in hostile news management, and has censored supportive developments. It has been shown to have been central in shaping public opinion against her, and therefore in contributing to her current desperate plight.
TV and the newspaper and the magazine play their higher volume sales game, while they ought to be ashamed for running down their nation's own. Prejudice to the chance of a girl coming home, but then for twisting the truth, the media is well known.
The deployment of the AFP and the ABC in support of the government's policy to prioritize its international relationship with Indonesia ahead of the welfare of Schapelle Corby could not be more clear. However, government policy is equally applied across all relevant departments and areas. This includes those less visible to the public. Despite having a lower profile, examples of this do sometimes manifest in the public arena. One example of this was the seizure of Schapelle Corby's book royalties. These were intended to meet her enormous legal costs, enable a legal challenge, and pay for her mother to continue to travel from Australia to visit her. Yet, incredibly, Schapelle Corby was deprived of these vital funds.
Now this girl writes her book, telling about her injustice case, while clinging to her innocence, full of hope and faith. But our government's turned a deaf ear, saying, oh, it's just a proceed of crime. Well, I say, what kind of injustice do we got going on here? Do they think that we're blind and we cannot see the dirt on their hands? Do they think they got the rights to play with strings like puppeteers?
For the first time in Australian history, legal action was taken to seize book royalties under, quote, proceeds of crime, unquote, legislation. In 2005, Schapelle Corby begged the Australian government to forensically test the marijuana for country of origin, which could have freed her. Despite having treaty provision to do so, they refused to act.
But Howard was a lawyer, like John Howard's a lawyer. He knew what was going on, and yet time and time again they kept on saying that they had no influence with the Indonesian courts. And yet there was a policy which was signed in 1987, which is a treaty allowing them that they must get a sample of evidence in murder or drug cases. If they apply for it, then it must be given. And the Australian government kept on telling the Australian people that they couldn't interfere. Well, they weren't interfering. They had every right to. The AFP could have asked for a sample, and they had every right to ask for that sample of marijuana.
Police turned it into a public bonfire, burning the items Corby was carrying when she was arrested in 2004. They included her boogie-board bag and the 4.2 kilograms of marijuana customs officials found inside it.
We don't have a chance anymore to bring this evidence to the court when there is extraordinary.
The evidence was destroyed on the orders of the Supreme Court.
Schapelle Corby begged everyone she could to forensically test the evidence. But the government later represented this reality entirely differently.
And more.
The Freedom of Information Act is intended to allow citizens to have access to information in possession of their elected government. In 2009, a test request was made for information relating to the AFP's dealings with the Indonesian National Police with respect to Schapelle Corby. Having exhausted all means of delay, the AFP FOI team eventually provided blank page after blank page and admitted blatant censorship. However, the rationale provided for the censorship was revealing in itself. The other government departments, the